Hello everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Destiny video. Spirit of Rebellion has been out for about a week and a half, and I've went through and picked out my 10 favorite villain supports and events. We're not doing any cards that require dice for this video, so it's just 10 villain supports and events that I really like, and I've had a lot of fun with. They're not in any particular order, so we're just going to start with our very first card. We'll be back with that in just a second. And first up, I have Battle Formation. Red event, 0 resources, has ambush, so you get that extra action out of it. Count the number of red characters you have. You may re-roll that many of your dice. So I've tested this in my General Veers and TIE Pilots deck. It's pretty good, especially because that deck is all red. It could also slide into a deck running, let's say, 3 Stormtroopers and the Tusken Raider. So you just count the number of red characters you have. In my case, in Veers and Pilots, it's 3. I get to reroll 3 dice and then immediately go ahead and resolve them. So let's say I reroll and I've now am sitting on 8 damage. That's 8 damage that I can then immediately resolve before my opponents can, react to it. I think I killed a Snap Wexley in one shot using this, where I had a couple damage out, a couple blanks. So then I played Battle Formation on my turn, re-rolled the stuff that I wasn't satisfied with, and then eventually ended up where I had 8 ranged damage. Used Ambush from Battle Formation to deal 8 damage to Snap and get rid of him because I didn't want him out, so I would have to keep paying a resource if I wanted to claim the battlefield. So Battle Formation, very good in, I would say probably mostly aggro is what I've used it in and what I've seen it in. But aggro red decks where you're running ranged damage, it's a nice way to re-roll dice and then immediately get to resolve them. So that's Battle Formation. We'll be right back with our next card. And the next card we have is Doubt, 0 resources. Reroll an opponent's die, then that opponent either resolves that die or removes it. So this is a really good way if you know your opponent is trying to set up for like a really big combo. Let's say they've got their combo set, they've got like a base damage and a bunch of modified sides. You can play Doubt, have them re-roll their base damage. If it happens to land on base damage, you just take that base damage because they're only allowed to resolve that one die, and then they're stuck sitting on a bunch of modified dice that they're either going to have to do a discard to re-roll some of it, or they're going to have to play an event that'll let them, turn a die to any side or something like that. So if Doubt ends up working out for you, where let's say you re-roll their die and it lands on a blank, they then have to remove it. If it lands on like a resource, they can resolve that. But it basically makes them re-roll it, and you're hoping they're going to get something that they can't use at all, like a blank, or something that is maybe even beneficial to them. Like, okay, you got a resource, but at least you're not going to be able to resolve just a ton of damage against you because you took away um, the one base damage. Also, if they have something showing, like let's say you're running this with old Vader or even new Vader with 3 melee damage, and they have a force throw special out, you can play Doubt, have them re-roll the force throw special, and may land on like disrupt or something else. They then have to resolve that, and then they remove the die. So they're not going to be able to use force throw to throw 3 damage at your character. So that's Doubt. It could be a little bit risky, but also it's probably you are mitigating what they can do because once they re-roll it, they can only resolve that one die. If you were to also couple this with something like with Swiftness, so you pay 1 to play Swiftness, has Ambush, and then it gives the next card that you play Ambush. So you can pay 1, Swiftness, Doubt, re-roll their die, they resolve it, and then you can do something else. So it's a really nice way to potentially take a really good combo that they set up and like completely break the combo or at least severely lower what that combo could do. So that's Doubt. We're going to move into our next card. And next up we have Salvage Stand. 0 resources and just a support. After one of your dice rolls a resource, you may exhaust the support to force an opponent to lose 1 resource. So obviously going to go well with like Unkar Jabba, but I think this could end up being a staple in Yellow Villain. It essentially gives them disrupt even if you're not playing any characters that actually have any disrupt sides. You're likely to be rolling at least some resources during the game, So you know, whenever you roll a resource, if you haven't exhausted it, you exhaust it, they lose a resource. You are like doing a lot of resource control with this. So you can roll a resource. It's like, oh, okay, I rolled a resource. They lose a resource. Next turn, or next goes back to you. You can resolve it to get a resource. If you have two of these out, you can essentially make them lose both of their resources if you just exhaust each salvage stand. So I can see it becoming a staple in yellow villain just because resources show up on quite a lot of cards. Like not everything's going to have disrupt, not everything's going to have discard, but a lot of stuff is going to have a lot of dice are going to have resources on them. And again, this is going to fit perfectly well with like Jabba Unkar, like thematically, because you're going to be getting a lot of resources with Unkar, um, doing a lot of disrupt with him as well. And also, if you got Salvage Stand, you're going to be just making sure your opponents almost never have resources. So that Salvage Stand, we're going to move into our next card. Next, we have Imperial War Machine, 0 resources. Resolve one of your red dice showing a resource cost for free. So, a lot of, especially with like stormtroopers and like some of their rifles, the rocket launcher, things like that, there are resource costs on those, and you may not always have the resources to resolve those dice. You can use the Rebel War Room, but that after you resolve one die, your turn is over and you're going to pass all your further actions. That's why I really like Imperial War Machine because it's resolve like the 4 damage on a rocket launcher. If you don't have the resource, normally you wouldn't be able to resolve that 4 damage. But with Imperial War Machine, you play Imperial War Machine, and you can resolve that 4 damage for free. If you have a way to make this ambushable, so let's say you have a resource, and let's say you have um, a good amount of range damage out already, and you want to pay the one resource to maybe potentially get ambush. So what you can do is, if you have swiftness again, neutral card, really good. Um, Pay 1 to play swiftness, gives you ambush. So then gives you ambush and gives a card you play after that ambush as well. So you have ambush, you play Imperial War Machine, resolve your one resource costed die for free. You then resolve the rest of the range damage dice using the extra action that Swiftness gave you. So I really like Imperial War Machine, especially if you're out of resources and you're running a lot of like red villain that requires resources, like again like rocket launchers and stormtroopers. Like the F11D rifle has a resource side or resource costed side, so you can use Imperial War Machine to resolve those for free. So that's Imperial War Machine. We're gonna move it to our next card. Next up, we have Bait and Switch, so 0 resources. It also has Ambush, so you get your extra action after you play it. And turn one of your dice showing a resource to any side. I've played quite a few games in Tabletop Simulator against Vader Raider specifically that use this. So let's say Vader rolls a resource, and then it's Bait and switch Vader to 3 melee damage, and immediately get to resolve that damage, plus any other melee damage you have, because it's not just resolving one. It's turn a die to a side not showing a resource, or turn it to any side. So it goes from Vader's resource side to Vader's 3 melee side, and then you can resolve, Vader's 3 melee, and maybe let's say you have Tusken Raider on melee as well. You can then resolve all that melee damage at once. So Bait and Switch is really good. I've used it myself. I've had it used against me to great effect, especially like I said with Vader or anything that has like a high amount of damage. So like 2 melee, 3 melee, 2 range, 3 range works really well with this kind of dice. And then also, again, it has ambush, so you get to not just turn it to that side, you get to immediately resolve it in any other dice that share the same symbol that you just turned it to. So that's Bait and Switch. We're going to move into our next card. All right, next up we have Manipulate, so 0 resources. Turn one of your dice to a side showing a blank, then turn an opponent's die to a side showing a blank. Very good control card, so if your opponent has like a force throw special out, and you have, let's say, just like a resource, and they have that, you can turn your resource die to a blank to turn their force throw special into a blank. It also sets up for our next card, but I really like it, 'cause especially if they have a big combo that they're getting ready to set up. like a bunch of damage, you can turn one of your dice to a blank to turn their die, that's like the normal melee damage or range damage, to a blank and make it so they have to discard to reroll to get that base damage back. It combos very well with our next card as well. So that's Manipulate. We'll be right back with our next card, which takes full advantage of what Manipulate does. All right, next up we have Anger. This is the card that ties into Manipulate, so it has zero resources. Play only if you have two or more dice showing blank, so you're going to get a blank from using Manipulate, and then you can resolve an opponent's die showing either ranged or melee damage as if it were your die. So you are this whole chain of events. It's very like hard control. So you're turning dice to different sides that they might not want them to be on, and then you are using those dice, other dice, against them. So let's say they have a couple damage showing, and let's say somehow you also maybe gave Manipulate Ambush. You can then play Anger. You have two blanks because you turn, let's say you already had a blank, and you use Manipulate to turn a die to a blank. You now meet the two blank requirement to play Anger, and now you are going to resolve their die against them and also remove it. So let's say they had a die on two melee damage. You have two blanks, you play Anger, they take two melee damage, and you also remove their die because you're resolving it. So it gets removed after it gets resolved. So that's Anger. We're going to move it to our next card. Now we have Now You Will Die, one resource. Resolve one of your dice as if it were showing melee damage. It keeps its original value. So if you have let's say your opponent's character, their last character only has two more health before that character is defeated, and you're sitting on a two resource die or a two shield die, two disrupt die. It doesn't matter. You pay one resource, you resolve whatever that die is. Let's say two shields. That two shield die now becomes a two melee die. You resolve it, defeat their character, and win. So it's a nice way to make it so you don't have to discard or reroll, because you could be like, okay, I just need two damage to win, and I have two resources or a two resource die. I can now, instead of having to discard or reroll to get that base damage, I can just pay one and treat that die as melee damage and win the game. So that's Now You Will Die. We're going to move into our next card. Next up, we have 1/4 portion, one resource. Remove an opponent's die, then that opponent gains one resource. So it's you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. Do I want them to get a resource, or would I rather their die be removed? Let's say your character only has 3 health left, and they have the 3 melee die showing. Pay a resource, get rid of their melee die, and they get a resource. So you pay one, they get one, the die gets removed. Works really well in Jabba Unkar because you can use 1/4 portion, remove their die, they get the resource, and then next turn you can roll Unkar out and immediately disrupt their resources if you have something like Fast Hands on him. But I think this could be a pretty good card in Yellow Villain. You are giving them a resource to remove a die, but it may be worth it in some situations where, let's say you're sitting on, again, you're playing Vader Raider. Vader's on 3 melee damage, and their Vader only has 3 health left, and they're also showing 3 melee damage. You can pay one, remove their 3 melee damage, they get a resource, and then you can still, unless they disrupt your other die, next turn, resolve it. So it's a really nice dice control card. It does cost you because you have to pay the resource plus they get a resource. But if it's like very situational, it might be like, okay, there's a force throw special out there that I don't want to deal with. I would gladly pay a resource to remove their force throw special instead of them throwing one of my high value dice at me, like a 2 or a 3 damage die. It'd be worth it to, like, especially if it's lethal damage on a force throw. Let's say you have a character that has 2 health left and you have a 2 range damage die showing and they have force throw. I would gladly pay the resource to make it so my character wouldn't be defeated. So that is 1/4 portion. We're going to move into our next card. And next up we have them now. This is our final card for this video. So 2 resources. Play only if you control the battlefield. Turn up to 4 of your dice to sides showing damage either ranged or melee. A little more expensive, so it costs 2. Plus you have to have control of the battlefield. But if you can find a way to give this ambush, so let's say you have 3 resources. You play Tactical Mastery, you get 2 additional actions. Pay 2 to play We Have Them Now as the first additional action from Tactical Mastery. Second additional action from Tactical Mastery would just be to resolve whatever damage you turn your dice to. So it'd be ranged or melee. I really like this card, especially if you can, again, Gibbet Ambush or get a way to play it and then immediately resolve it through something like Tactical Mastery or something like that. Again, it's dependent on having the battlefield, and it does cost 2. But I've had games where I've had, I think I have this in my Veers and Pilots deck to where I've done it with Tactical Mastery, so Tactical Mastery into this to win a game. It's pretty fun, especially if you have those 3 resources, you can get it all to go off at once. So that's going to do it for today's video. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow. And I want you to take care and have a good one.